Well, good morning. Today I'm on a walk up to a falls called Cochran Falls. Now, Cochran Falls is very close to Amicalola Falls, which is quite a famous falls up here in North Georgia. It's Amicalola is the state park, and it's just a little further around the escarpment which they both fall off. In fact, there's a third sister as well, third sister waterfall, which is called Bearden Falls, which is even further over to the east. Now, not many people know either Bearden or Cochran Falls. They're a lot more remote, shall we say. The access is nowhere near as good. But I've got a good trail guide today, and so far it's been pretty accurate. And I've arrived here at a campsite. It's quite a nice campsite. The creek itself runs down the side of it, and according to the trail guide, at this point here it starts to get a little bit steeper up to the actual falls. So I'm having a wee break, and then we'll head on up there. Now, Cochran Falls was named after a family called Cochran. In fact, the Cochran Creek here and the falls as well were named after the family, and they settled this area in around 1823. The head of the family was Abraham Cochran, and he was about 30 years old when he came to the area with his wife and maybe one or two children. But they came from North Carolina, and they were Scots Irish. In fact, the family of Cochran itself came from a place in Ireland called Buncombe. And they were here at least until, well, I mean, the head of the family, Abraham Cochran, he died when he was about 83 years old, and that would have been about in 1877. And his wife outlived him by about 3 years, which is quite surprising because she had a very tough life. They had anything between 13 and 17 children, various reports on different numbers, but either way, that's a lot of children to be popping out. So she had a tough life, and it's quite a remote area, so the family obviously liked the remoteness of it. In fact, a lot of the Scotch Irish lived in remote areas, in the mountainous areas of North Carolina, Georgia, South Carolina, that kind of thing. And a lot of them were moonshiners too. Now, some of the children actually moved up over the top of the escarpment, and they founded a village called Buncombe Village, named after the original place in Ireland that the family had come from. It doesn't really exist anymore, but it certainly was there for a long time. Well, that was quite the scramble coming up here, and certainly the trail guide was again correct, because it is a difficult part of the hike, and especially, well, you probably noticed that it's not a good idea to be holding a camera in one hand filming and trying to scramble up the side of a waterfall, especially when it's so slick and fast as it was like that. But yeah, it's quite a bit of a scramble. The lower part wasn't so bad. In fact, the trail is quite good. It's just that there's so many huge big trees have fallen over the path that getting up and over them is the hard part. But yeah, quite a scramble here at the end. I haven't gone up the top yet. I'm just kind of like at one of the mid cascades here. Just gonna get another wee breather and then go have another scout around. but so far pretty amazing. Okay, so my first shot is it's a blue sky day, as you can see, which is not exactly what was forecast. So what I've decided to do first of all is take out the infrared camera. It's an old D200 which I had converted, and I've got it set up on the tripod here out in the middle of the cascade, and I'm hoping to be able to slow the shutter speed down enough. I'll be able to get a nice viewpoint of the main waterfall coming down. So if I just show you what that view is like. You can actually see that the waterfall snakes quite nicely around and down and through the image, just like we've talked about before. So I'm going to slow down the shutter to about half a second, quarter of a second, like I did before. I'm going to use a polarizer and a neutral density filter because, as I say, the sun is directly on here. And the reason I'm using infrared is because I'll be able to cut down significantly on the blue sky. I'll be able to turn it almost black if I have some in the scene. But also, it lends itself better to infrared or black and white with all the harsh shadows from the direct sun in the middle of the day. So I've got it on about 20 millimeters. We'll take this picture and see how we get on. Well, I ended up taking a few pictures there, and as I normally do, I bracketed with some different shutter speeds. I used the half second, quarter second, and 1/8 of a second. And the reason I do that is just in case I'm blowing out any highlights, especially on such a harsh day with such a big dynamic range. But secondly, because the flow of the water, sometimes when it's closer to you there's more of a blur, whereas further away there's less. And so you can actually use that to your advantage later on if you want to take the time to almost like paint in more texture in certain parts of the waterfall. So just to have it, that's what I did. And then I moved to a vertical format and actually did a 3-shot panorama just to try and get a little bit more in. I think I turned it up to the maximum on that lens, which is a 16 millimeter. Turned it up vertical and then took 3 shots. So if that looks good, I'll stitch it together and put it up as well. But since I'm here and while I'm here, I think I'll go ahead and use the Fujifilm X-T2 and put a wide angle lens on that and just take a couple of color pictures. In fact, I might actually turn it to its black and white preview mode so I can see what shadows I'm getting, what textural differences I'm getting. It's a lot easier to see the differences in the tones of things when you're in black and white mode. So I'll do that, but the raw file will still have all the color information. So I'm going to set that up now and take a few pictures with that as well. Well, that's me back down, certainly past the worst of the scrambling, back down near the campsite area. And I really wanted to give a big shout out to a young man by the name of Mark Oleg. Now, I've never met Mark, but he does a lot of the trail riding for these waterfalls in North Georgia, and I think he does a really excellent job. There's been absolutely nothing that I've found that he didn't describe really well. So his website is called Hike the Appalachians, I think. Certainly I'll put it in the content down below the video so that you can link to that. But yes, good job. And truly is a gorgeous place. So there's a lot of cascades and things like that that come from the top down towards the campsite area, and that's definitely going to be worth investigating sometime in the future. Perhaps not on such a harsh day as today, harsh sunlight that is. There was also another viewpoint that I found, which I think would be quite interesting for a late afternoon evening shot. Best time would probably be in the autumn, in the fall, when the colour on the trees probably match the colour in the sky, something like that. So definitely going to come back. But for today I'm going to head back to the car, and since I only took those 1 or 2 shots up the top, I think what I'll do is when I get back and get them up on the screen, I'll do a quick review. So until later. And as if by magic, here we are. So let's have a quick look at these photographs. And the one I want to start with is the first infrared picture that I took, which you can see here. So it's at half a second, I believe, f22, and there's a lot of blur in the water coming down. But also the part that because I was pointing the camera quite up the way, we have quite a lot of the trees pointing in towards the middle at the top, and this effect is not so pleasing for me. Also, there's a lot of busyness and a lot of mess around in the edges here. The rivulets of water don't really show up against the rocks because of the particular way that infrared actually works. And we have this white coming in here from the leaves of the trees, which are, I think, distracting from the water coming down. Now, I also did the vertical composition, and you can see from these 3 images, these are the original images that I took. So it was a 3-shot panorama, and when I put them together, this is what we got. Now this is after the channels have been converted for the infrared. So the water is appearing blue. We can see that the sky up here, I've turned it down so it's almost black, so it's not distracting at all. But we still have this, the trees pointing into the middle. However, there's a lot of keystoning in this. And so when I actually use the vertical and transform that, I get very straight lines up and down for the trees. And you can see I've converted this to black and white and increased the contrast somewhat. So we get a lot better image. Just let's look back at the first one here again. And I think there's a big improvement here, especially because of the vertical nature of the tree trunks now. But we still have this issue of the rivulets disappearing and a lot of messiness around. If you zoom in here, you can see there's actually catkins on the tree here, which are a little nice detail, but I think a lot of distraction as well. So when we look at the color, there's quite a lot of improvement actually. I quite like the color. Now the sun is directly coming from behind me, and what that does is it actually helps improve the color on some images, but it also makes the image look quite flat. So we've got it coming directly in, and there's not actually that much shadow. There's shadow down here from the trees on the side, but there's not that much shadow to be seen. It's quite harsh light, so where there are overhangs you get some quite deep shadows, but there's not that much shadow detail. It looks a little bit flat, and but the color does punch up a little bit because you have that direct sun. Now the water is again quite blurred, and this is again at half a second. I wanted to show you the same image, but if we actually look at the one with just a quarter of a second, you can see there's quite a lot more texture in the water. It looks a little bit blue here in the shadows, but we're starting to see these rivulets really stand out against the background, which is nice. So my final stage here was to convert that to black and white, and I've also darkened down this area a little bit too. But you can see now that the river really does stand out against the background. We've got very nicely defined rivulets, and if you compare that back to the original or even the panoramic one, You see how much more messy that looks compared with the converted color. So I think on this occasion infrared didn't really work, but it's not a bad image when you come to converting the color one to black and white, which is what I'd said when I was up there at the time, that I thought it probably was more of a black and white image. So not a portfolio image by any means, but a nice memory of a wonderful day out. So I hope you've again enjoyed my little adventure. Please do give me a thumbs up if you like it, and if you're enjoying the content, consider to subscribe to the channel. But we will see you again on the next little adventure. Thanks again.